What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Magic the Conversation. I'm started a little late today. I did have my niece's birthday to attend to, so I thought I would be home sooner, but here we are now. This is going to be a long stream because the set we are covering today is Urza's Saga. And this set was already out on the market when I started playing the game, and it introduced me a lot to the game, and in my opinion has some of the most powerful cards that the game has seen since its debut. And we will go over every single card that is in the Urza's Saga set. As far as the storyline goes, where we last left off was Exodus, where Gerard and the crew of the Weatherlight escaped Wrath through the portal. They left Krovax and Urtai behind. Krovax was turned into full vampire, and they just couldn't save him. And they reluctantly completely forgot about Urtai. So he was captured by the Phyrexians. However, in Urza's Saga, we are going back in time. This is not following Gerard and the crew of the Weatherlight. This is following Urza's story and how he came about creating the whole legacy weapon and a deeper dive into the Phyrexians. The expansion symbol is a pair of gears. Urza was a really, not only is he powerful and immortal thanks to the power stone that he has, but also he was a good artificer, and he's great with artifacts and the like. Urza's Saga was the 15th expansion, and it released in October of 1998. And without further ado, let's begin with the cards themselves. First card on the block, we have Absolute Grace. All creatures gain protection from black. Definitely a good color hosing card against black, used for white. In pursuit of Urza, the Phyrexians sent countless foul legions into Sarah's realm. Though beaten back, they left it tainted with uncleansable evil. Sarah was a powerful angel. There's reference to her as in Sarah Angel in the original Magic set. And it is an artificial realm that it's governed by angels. And they had an alliance with Urza. And we'll see more powerful angels in the set to come. Absolute Law, it's the kind of partnership card. It does the same thing as Absolute Grace, except it gives all creatures protection from red. The strength of law is unwavering. It is an iron bar in a world of water. Black and red can't really do much against enchantments. Black can at least get rid of enchantments through discard means, but red can't really get rid of enchantments. There might be two cards that force your opponent to shuffle a permanent into their library, but once this card hits the battlefield, red doesn't really have a hope of killing any more of the opponent's creatures. Strong sideboard card to have. Abundance. Instead of drawing a card, you may choose a land or non-land and reveal cards from your library until you reveal a land or until you reveal a card of the chosen kind. Put the card into your hand and all other cards revealed on the bottom of your library in any order. This kind of helps you. If you need a land, you're guaranteed to draw a land. If you don't need a land, then you're guaranteed to not get a land as your draw. Another good enchantment to have. Abyssal Horror. 6 mana 2/2. That sounds awful. 6 mana for a 2/2. It has flying. When it comes into play, target player chooses and discards 2 cards. Why this card is a rare, I have no idea. This card absolutely sucks. The artwork is pretty cool, but other than that, it's probably one of the worst black creatures I've ever seen in the game. It has no face of its own. It wears that of its latest victim. We can see in the artwork that somebody's face is stretched out along this, I don't even know what to call it, but it resembles like a bat from what I see, but still, the card is completely horrible. I don't think I've ever seen anyone use it. And it's surprising that it's an urza'ssaga set. Don't get me wrong, as powerful as the set urza'ssaga is, there's still probably some trash cards in it. Academy Researchers, 3 mana 2/2. When they come into play, you can choose an enchant creature card in your hand and put it directly into play onto Academy Researchers. There's a card called Eldrazi Conscript, which gives enchanted creature +10/+10, and every time they attack, the defending player has to sacrifice a permanent. It costs 10 mana to cast, but if you play Academy Researches, you can just put that 10/10 enchantment on them, and you get a 12/12 for 3 mana. It's one of the best cards I can think to combo with it. Acidic Soil. Acidic Soil deals 1 damage to each player for each land he or she controls. Phyrexia had tried to take Urza's soul. He was relieved that Sheev tried to claim only his souls. As we can see, a young Urza, and the soil is melting his metal boots. This hits all players, so you have to be careful that you don't kill yourself or your teammate when you use this card. Acridian, 2 mana, 2/4. It has Echo. Echo means that when you cast the creature on the turn it comes out, on the next turn you have to pay its casting cost again, or you have to end up sacrificing it. If I echoed there, I hope if you guys hear an echo, I just fixed it, but we're just going to keep going. The Elves of Argoth were trained to ride these creatures even when their mounts traveled upside down. 2 mana, 2/4. It's good early game. It's gonna survive a lot of combat, but it will slow you down having to pay the echo cost. And I think green has better, more aggressive creatures to cast on the second turn, and we'll see more of them in this set, such as Albino Troll, 2 mana for a 3/3. It also has echo, but it can regenerate, which is really good. Anaconda, 4 mana 3/3 snake with Swamp Walk. If the opponent has a swamp, they cannot block the Anaconda. If you're smaller than the Anaconda, it considers you food. If you're larger than the Anaconda, it considers you a lot of food. I love my snakes. Angelic Chorus. For 5 mana, whenever a creature comes into play under your control, gain life equal to that creature's toughness. The very young and the very old know the best songs the angels sing. One combo that I used this card with, and I do believe it's in the set, is called Phyrexian Processor. It's an artifact that when it enters the battlefield, you pay X life, and however many life you pay 4 mana and tap it, and you put a creature with power and toughness equal to whatever the amount of life you paid. So if you have Angelic Course out and you use Phyrexian Processor, let's just say you pay 10 life, you pay 4, tap the processor, you get a 10/10 Phyrexian token. You're going to gain the life back with Angelic Course because the token comes into play. It's a 10/10, so you gain 10 life. The next turn, you can keep making tokens and you're going to gain 10 life every turn, or however amount of life that you did pay. Angelic Page, 2 mana, 1/1 flying spirit. Is it an angel spirit? Yes, it has been revised. Tap it to give target attacking or blocking creature +1/+1 until end of turn. If only every message were as perfect as its bearer. A cute little combat oriented card. Annul. Counter target artifact or enchantment spell for just 1 blue. The most effective way to destroy a spell is to ensure it was never cast in the first place. Antagonism. During each player's discard step, antagonism deals 2 damage to that player unless one of his or her opponents successfully took damage of that turn. It's a pretty unique red enchantment spell that could, if you're able to stop your opponent from attacking you, or especially with creatures, they're going to take 2 damage a turn. Arcane Laboratory, or Laboratory, however you would like to pronounce it. Each player cannot play more than 1 spell each turn. It soon became obvious that some experiments were best overseen by fireproof teachers. Now, we have Karn the Silver Golem in the background here. To recap on the story as we're going through the set, Urza ended up creating an academy with a Baron, another powerful wizard, Baron's wife, Rain, and those would actually end up being Hannah's parents, Baron and Rain. And here in the laboratory, or in the Tolarian Academy, Urza constructed and gave life to Karn, the Silver Golem, and Karn gets his own card in this set, which we will see soon. This card is pretty powerful because if the opponent tries to cast a spell and you cast counterspell, then they can't play any more spells for the turn. It also slows down highly aggressive decks. It's a good card for blue. Arc Lightning, 3 mana. Arc Lightning deals 3 damage divided as you choose among any number of creatures and or players. Fortunately, it is a sorcery, though, so that kind of weakens its power. But it's still pretty good. Rain Clouds don't last long in Sheev, but that doesn't stop the lightning. Here we had, I assume 2 of these people were fighting, and then the lightning hit 2 of them, and then the third strike's just going somewhere else. Argothian Elder, 4 mana 2/2. Tap them to untap 2 target lands. Sharpen your ears, an elven expression meaning to grow wiser. This is really good with lands that tap for more than 1, and there's quite a few in the set that are worth a lot of money today, and we will be seeing them soon. Argothian Enchantress, 2 mana for a 0/1, cannot be the target of spells or abilities. Whenever you successfully cast an enchantment spell, draw a card. You can see that this set is very enchantment heavy. Argothian Swine, 4 mana 3/3 trample. In Argoth, the shortest path between 2 points is the one the swines make. Decent regular green creature. At least they have trample. Speaking of trample, Argothian Worm, 4 mana 6/6. That's a really good deal, especially with the creature having trample. However, when it comes into play, any player may sacrifice a land to force you to put the worm back on top of your library. So this isn't really as good if you get it late game when the opponent doesn't really need so much land, but early game it's really good. Even if the opponent sacrifices a land and forces you to put the worm back on top of your library, you destroyed one of their lands, so to speak. So if you keep casting the worm every turn, they're going to keep losing land. Hey, Jameson, I can see your message this time, thankfully. You remember the swines and the Dirkwood boars in the starter deck you had. Yep, Dirkwood boars. I remember those goofy-looking boars. Currently, Argothian Worm is my favorite card in the set. Attunement. Return attunement to your hand, draw 3 cards, then discard 4. The solution can hide only for so long. I've never used this card. I think I've seen it used a couple times by my friends, but I think there's better card draw. Back to basics. Non-basic lands do not untap during their controller's untap steps. A ruler wears a crown while the rest of us wear hats, but which would you rather have when it's raining? Quote from Baron. This is really good. A lot of people use non-basic lands nowadays. So this would really shut them down if they're using a deck that's more than one color. Speaking of Baron, here's this card right here, the Master Wizard. 3 mana, 1/1. You can pay 2 mana to sacrifice, and you have to sacrifice a permanent to return target creature to its owner's hand. Knowledge is no more expensive than ignorance, and at least as satisfying. This is pretty good to have as long as if you have like tokens or land that you don't need anymore, or a way to reoccur to bring land and artifacts and back into your hand from your graveyard. You can ensure that you're going to keep returning your opponent's creatures to their hand. Baron's Codex. Costs 4. During your upkeep, you may put a page counter on it. Pay 4 and tap it, and sacrifice it to draw X cards, where X is the number of page counters on the Codex. Doesn't do anything when it comes into play, but eventually you'll be drawing some cards if your opponent doesn't mess with it. Bedlam. Creatures cannot block. Sometimes quantity, in the absence of quality, is good enough. We have some goblins hiding through the trenches, while these Viashino, the lizard warriors, are flanking the high ground. This is a really, depending on the deck that you're using, you really have to be careful when you use it, because this means you can't block as well. So you have to hope that your deck is more aggressive than your opponent's. Oh, I forgot about this card. Befoul. For 4 mana, you can either destroy land or a non-black creature. If a creature is destroyed in this way, it cannot be regenerated. This priestess is going to be covered by this black ooze. The land putrefied at its touch, turned into an oily bile in seconds. A quote from Radiant, the Archangel. Bereavement. Whenever a green creature is put into a graveyard from play, its controller chooses and discards a card. Grief is as useless as love. Gix, the Yawgmoth Praetor. So at the time, Gix was in charge of overseeing the invasion of Dominaria from Phyrexia. Gix was the one who tricked Urza's brother Mishra into becoming a Phyrexian and turned him against his brother. Urza would eventually kill Gix, and Volrath would end up becoming like the next puppet of the Phyrexians. And we've gone through Volrath in the Tempest block. But we're back in time now, and Gix is currently the leader. Here in the artwork, this Phyrexian killed this elf, and the elf's, I assume, lover or best friend is mourning the loss. Blanchwood Armor, 3 mana creature enchantment. Enchanted creature gets +X/+X, where X is the number of forests you control. Obviously, this would only do best in a deck that just has forests. Put it on creatures with trample, or even unblockable, or flying. It can end a game quickly. Blanchwood Treefolk. 5 mana, 4/5, doesn't have any ability. The massive Argivian attack on their rooted kindred was a declaration of war to the Treefolk. I do like the artwork. D. Terlizzi does a lot of good fantasy, like goblins, elves, trolls. Her artwork is well known in those. Blasted Landscape. Tap it to add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool, or you could cycle it. Cycling debuts in this set, where you just pay 2 mana at any time to discard the card to draw a new one. So if you already have enough land and you end up drawing Blasted Landscape, you can just pay 2 mana, ditch it, and get a new card. Blood Vassal, 3 mana, 2/2 Thrall. You can sacrifice at any time to add 2 black mana to your mana pool. They are bred to suffer and born to die, much like humans. True words spoken from Gix. Bog Raiders, 3 mana, 2/2 Swamp Walk Zombies. The zombies are just moving through the muck. Let weak feed on weak, that we may divine the nature of strength. Good, another black card that's good against other black decks. And why they showed this one in another language is beyond me. Brand, gain control of all permanents you own. By this glyph, I affirm your role. So this is strictly a sideboard card. I don't know why it's a rare. There are quite a few cards that say gain control of target permanent, and using brand means you get all those cards back. But I've never seen anybody use this card, not even in their sideboard. Yep, Bog Raiders. Jameson just thought they were giant skulls back in the day. Nope, they are zombies going through the swamps. It's good that gives them like the whole idea that they do have swamp walk. Bravado. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 for each other creature you control. We drive the dragons from our home. Why should we fear you? Fire Eye, the Viashino Bay. So the Viashino are... they were guarding the Shivan Rig, which was a high in energy and mana that Urza needed to power a lot of his artifacts. So he had to make peace with them. Here are the Viashino. It's funny, the colors that they're wearing. I don't think I've seen Viashino wear any kind of other armor or clothing like this in any other artwork. But here Urza is pretty much trying to say, hey, let me use your rig. This card is pretty good in decks that where you have put out a lot of creatures fast, like goblins and elves. But since it's red, you're most likely going to do goblins. Breach. Target creature gets power +2 until end of turn. That creature cannot be blocked, set by artifact and or black creatures this turn. Here we have some Phyrexians coming through the portal. Phyrexians are like 90% machine with some undead flesh on them. And all they want is they view flesh as being weak, and they want to remake life in their own image. Yep, this is when I know Urza'ssaga was the newest set when I started playing and started bringing the cards home. And then pretty soon after, Urza's Legacy, which will be the next set after this, will be coming out. And that was the first packs that we actually bought. Because I remember Kevin got Molten Hydra and Phyrexian Plague Lord, but those were the legacy cards, and I ended up getting Pestilence. But I'm getting ahead of myself now because that's from the Urza's Legacy. Back to Urza'ssaga. Brilliant Halo. I forgot about this card. Enchanted creature gets +1/+2. If Brilliant Halo is put into any graveyard from play, put it back in your hand. Enchantments that go back to your hand from the graveyard are really good. Even though this only gives the creature +1/+2, sometimes those little bonuses are game changing. Bull Hippo, 4 mana, 3/3 with Island Walk. Defending player has an island. The hippo is unblockable. I love the artwork. How would you not hear it approach? It's a hippo. They're giving commander. Hippos are actually quite graceful in the water. Bulwark, 5 mana. During your upkeep, Bulwark deals 1 damage to target opponent for each card in your hand greater than the number of cards in that player's hand. It will be the goblin's first bath and its last. Fire Eye, the Viashino Bay. They gave it boiling water, so this poor goblin is getting boiled. And here this Viashino is smiling. The goblins were always at war with the Viashino because they wanted control of the mana rig. I forgot about this card. Cackling Fiend, 4 mana, 2/1. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent discards a card. Its windpipe is only the first to amplify its maddening laugh. Forgot about the artwork. Creepy looking thing. It's better than Abyssal Horror, though. Carpet of Flowers. During your main phase, you may add up to X mana of any one color to your mana pool, where X is the number of islands target opponent controls. Another color hosing card against green hating blue. Beautiful artwork. Carry On Beetles. This one ripped an eye out of some face. It's a 1/1 bug. You pay 3, tap them, remove from the game up to 3 target cards in a single graveyard. It's all fun and games until someone loses an eye. I like this card for the artwork. It's just disgusting. The only time I used this card was I made a black deck that had a card that said return all creatures from all players' graveyards to the battlefield. Living Death is a good example of that. And to stop my opponent from getting any creatures back, I used Carry On Beetles to remove cards in their graveyard. Nowadays, there are so many good graveyard strategies that Carry On Beetles would be really good in shutting them down. Catalog. Draw 2 cards and then choose and discard 1 card. Without order come errors, and errors kill on Teleria. Yeah, in the Tolarian Academy, they were doing all sorts of experiments, especially with time travel, and that actually caused a major catastrophe on the island where some students got trapped in time forever. Some aged instantly, went from being a teenager to an old man into a decaying corpse. Others reversed from adulthood into an infant, into a fetus, and then, of course, they die because there's nothing to nurture them. Others got put in different time zones. Others got stuck in slow motion permanently. So some of these experiments that they were doing with Magic itself, that's what it means when Baron says errors kill on Teleria. And here's a card called Catastrophe. For 6 mana, destroy all lands or all creatures. Creatures destroyed this way cannot regenerate this turn. Radiant's eyes flashed. Go then, the angel spat at Sarah, and leave this world to those who truly care. Urza wanted Sarah to help him against the Phyrexians. Radiant viewed Urza as that if he was getting them involved, it was dooming their existence. And Radiant ended up being correct, because eventually Sarah's realm is destroyed in order to during the war against the Phyrexians. But in the artwork, we have the people who lived in the plane of Sarah's plane, and the plane is collapsing. Cathodian. 3 mana, 3/3. When it dies, add 3 colorless mana to your mana pool. Instead of creating a tool that would be damaged by heat, the Thrawn built one that was charged by it. Never used the card. Cave Tiger. 3 mana, 2/2. Whenever a creature blocks it, Cave Tiger gets +1/+1 until end of turn. That means it'll be a 3/3 without anything boosted if something blocks it for 3 mana. The Druids found a haven in the cool limestone tunnels beneath Argoth. The invaders found only tigers. Child of Gaia. 6 mana, 7/7 trample. During your upkeep, you must pay 2 green or sacrifice the Child of Gaia, which really isn't a bad upkeep cost. At least you're not paying the 6 mana every turn. Plus, this thing regenerates, and it has trample. It is definitely worth it, and a lot of my friends actually beat me with this card, because green was a really popular color, especially when you're just starting out to learn Magic. Green's probably the easiest color if you want to learn how to play the game. Start with green. Green will teach you the basics, especially with using creatures, attacking, how combat works, and the like. Chimeric Staff. For 4 mana, it's an artifact. It doesn't really do anything on its own, but once you pay X mana, the staff becomes an artifact creature with power toughness equal to whatever you paid for X. A snake in the grass. Really good if you have ways to make mana fast, which there are a lot now thanks to other artifacts and lands that tap for more than 1 mana. Centennial Centaurs, 4 mana, 6/3. They have Echo. They cannot be the target of spells or abilities. Their power is pretty good, but their toughness unfortunately lacks. So the Echo cost kind of puts them in the not so good category. If maybe there were 6/4, I think it would be a little better. But on the 4th turn they come out, unless you have mana dorks to give you the mana to put them out early on, they're most likely not going to survive combat because your opponents might block with 1 or 2 creatures. And the fact that it can't be targeted spells or abilities mean you can't put any enchantments or artifact equipment on them to boost them or give them trample. Centennial Flute for 5 mana, pay X, tap it. Search your library for a creature with total casting cost no greater than X. Veil that card and put it into your hand. Shuffle your library afterwards. Really good card for searching for a creature that you want. I never owned it. Centennial Hierophant, 4 mana, 3/2 Druid. Each creature you control gains tap it, add 1 green mana to your mana pool. So this makes all your creatures mana dorks. From deep in the caves beneath the forest, the Hierophants plan the Druid's raids against the enemy. Claws of Gix. This doesn't cost any mana to cast. You can pay 1 and sacrifice a permanent to gain 1 life. When the Brotherhood of Gix dug out the cave of Koilos, they found their master's severed hand. They enshrined it, hoping that one day it would point the way to Phyrexia. Gix had his hand severed. He was going through the portal in the cave of Koilos, which is the portal that Urza and Mishra had found. And they were able to close the portal as Gix was escaping. And as Gix went through the portal closed on his hand as he slipped through, and that severed his hand. Clear, destroy target enchantment, or you could cycle it. Just shows a wizard, I guess, cleansing whatever was affecting this land. The first set to do color coding was Exodus, actually. The set before this one, with the bridge, last week's episode was the first to do the color codes. Cloak of Mist, enchanted creature is unblockable. Really good card, depending on what you put it on. All we could lose, we did. All we could keep, we do, and both are shrouded by mists. Confiscate, 6 mana, you control enchanted permanent. So you put it on either a land, a creature, an artifact, even a planeswalker. You end up gaining control of it. I don't understand why he worked so hard on a device to duplicate a sound so easily made with a hand and armpit. Baron, progress report. So we have 2 students here, and he got his little artifacts taken away. Now, these 2 students are actually future heroes in the Magic story. Student up here, her name is Jahora. She ends up being a really good artificer. I don't know if I'm saying that right. And down here is Teferi. And we mentioned Teferi back in the Mirage block, where he was the most powerful wizard. In the the Triangle of War, he was the peacekeeper of it all. And he ends up being really good at manipulating time. But he's just a kid, because like I said, we are back in time in this storyline here. Congregate, a really powerful gain life card. Target player gains 2 life for each creature in play. This includes your opponent's creatures. And you can also save your teammate if you're playing a team game. You could have target player gain 2 life for each creature in play. In a group game, this is also really good because there's going to be a lot of creatures on the battlefield at one point in time. In the Gathering, there is strength for all who founder, renewal for all who languish, love for all who sing. The Song of All, Canto 642. Contamination. During your upkeep, you have to sacrifice a creature. If you can't, you have to sacrifice Contamination. Whenever a land is tapped for mana, it produces it produces a black mana instead of its normal type and amount. Minus boyfriend Edits. Hi, welcome in. Contamination is a really great card. If you have a way to keep sacrificing a creature, you're going to lock your opponent out of the game unless they're playing black. Because if your opponent's, let's say your opponent's playing green-blue deck where they have forests and islands or dual lands that tap for either blue or a green, as long as Contamination is out on the field, it forces their lands to just tap for black. They're not even playing any black cards, so they're not going to be able to cast any spells until you run out of creatures. If you have a way to get at least one creature during your upkeep, like with creature tokens, then you just locked them out of the game. They can't. There's no hope of them winning unless you forget to sacrifice a creature or have mercy on your opponent. So I've never seen it actually. Oh, I've seen it happen once. So it's a really unfun feeling, but the card exists. Copper Gnomes, 2 mana 1/1. You can pay 4, sacrifice them, choose an artifact in your hand, and put it directly into play. Really good with Darksteel Colossus, which is an 11/11 trample for 11 mana. You could sacrifice the Copper Gnomes and put it out on the field. Start with 11 gnomes and a room of parts, and come morning you'll have 10 and a monster the likes of which you've never seen. So they just take each other apart and then put themselves into an even bigger beast. Bro, actually, what do pigeons do? Pigeons live just like all other birds. They live to eat and breed. That's it. Coral Merfolk. 2 mana, 2/1 Merfolk. They don't have any other ability. It is not unusual for a single family of Coral Merfolk to spend centuries carefully guiding the growth of the reefs where they make their home. I do like the artwork on them. They look more fish-like than human-like, but not as good as the root water ones. Corrupt. This was a game finisher in a lot of old games that we had back in the day. It costs 6 mana, so that's a lot, but Corrupt deals 1 damage to target creature or player for each swamp you control. When Corrupt successfully deals damage to a creature or player, gain life equal to that damage. Yawgmoth brushed Urza's mind, and Urza's world convulsed. Here Urza is in a power suit. He's in Phyrexia. He thinks he can take down the Phyrexians by himself during his first encounter with them, but he sees he is massively overpowered. And here he gets a touch of their corruption, which kind of leads him to become insane. And we'll see him dive into that insanity in future sets. Cradle Guard, 3 mana 4/4 Tree Folk with Trample and Echo. Mother Sleep, dream our lives, our roots your soul, our leaves your bed. Really good Tree Folk, very aggressive. 3 mana 4/4's Trample is definitely good. As long as you can afford the Echo cost, which is you just pay 3 mana on the next turn. I think it's worth it for a 4/4 with Trample. Crater Hellion, 6 mana 6/6. It has Echo, which is pretty costly, but when it comes into play, it deals 4 damage to each other creature. It's probably going to wipe at least half the battlefield, and it'll survive its own damage. Well, it doesn't even damage itself. It says each other creature. So even if you can't afford the Echo cost for whatever reason, you at least get the comes into play effect with it dealing 4 damage to each other creature. I guess I do like Crater Hellion better than Argothian Worm, so Crater Hellion is currently the favorite. Crazed Scourge, 4 mana 2/2 Imp. Oh, it's a Phyrexian Imp. I did not know that it got remade into a Phyrexian. It has haste and flying. They are Phyrexia's couriers. The messages they carry are inscribed on their slick hides. Crosswinds. It's enchantment. All creatures with flying get -2 power. Harbin's ornithopter had been trapped for 2 days within the currents of the storm. When the skies cleared, all he could see was a horizon of trees. Good against flying. Green does not do well against flying under normal circumstances. Crystal Chimes, 3 mana artifact. You can pay 3 and tap it, and sacrifice it to return all enchantments from your graveyard back to your hand. As Sarah was to learn, the peace and sanctity of her realm were as fragile as glass. Curfew for 1 blue. Each player chooses a creature they control and returns it to their owner's hand. But I'm not tired. I guess there was a strict curfew in the academy. This kid wanted to stay up reading, but he was caught by this one of the staff members. Darkest Hour for 1 black. All creatures are now black. Yawgmoth spent eons wrapping Phyrexians in human skin. They are the sleeper agents, and they are everywhere. Xantcha to Urza. So one thing Phyrexia would do, as it is mentioned, is it would kind of be like the Terminator. If you've ever seen the Terminator movies, they look like a regular human on the outside, but their blood is oil, and their organs are all like artificial. And they have artificial skeletons. But they posed as humans to further try to infiltrate Dominaria and help the Phyrexians invade. Dark Hatchling, 6 mana, flying, 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, destroy target non-black creature. That creature cannot be regenerated. It is costly by today's standards, but the artwork is amazing. Something brutal hatched out of this poor victim. But I've never seen the card used, probably because it costs so much. Dark Ritual gets a reprint with, I assume this was a goblin's hand or some sort of demon, maybe even an orc. And his blood is being siphoned into this. This is more laboratory-looking ritual. From Void evolved Phyrexia. Great Yawgmoth, father of machines, saw its perfection. Thus the grand evolution began. Defensive formation. Instead of the attacking player, you choose how creatures attacking you deal their combat damage. Your enemies will pound upon the door of your defenses, but only you shall have the key, and that is the key of life. Deep words from the Song of Canto, or Song of All, Canto 873. Despondency. Enchanted creature gets -2 power. When Despondency is put into a graveyard from play, return it to its owner's hand. So this will ensure that at least one creature is 2 power weakened. Excuse me. Destructive Urge, 3 mana enchant creature. When enchanted creature successfully deals combat damage to a player, that player sacrifices a land. Red Sky at Night, Dragon's Delight. We have a close-up of a dragon's face, and we see that it just raised a village. We can see the reflection in its eye, and the dragon is smiling. Hey, Austin, how are you doing? Welcome in. This card is good again on creatures that have flying or unblockable. And if you hit your opponent every turn, especially early on, they're going to be stuck, like locked out of playing the game, so to speak, because they're going to lose a land every turn. I know there's some unblockable creatures that only cost 2 mana. So you play that on the second turn. They're blue. And then on the third turn, play Destructive Urge on your unblockable creature. And if you were the player to go first, you're going to... If your opponent cannot destroy your creature then and there, then they're most likely just going to lose all their land after the next couple of turns. Really good card. But it is situational. Diabolic Servitude. When Diabolic Servitude comes into play, choose a creature card in your graveyard and put it directly into play. When the chosen creature dies, remove that creature from the game and return Diabolic Servitude back to your hand. If Diabolic Servitude leaves play, remove the chosen creature from the game. Another good Graveyard Resurrection card. Artwork shows this Phyrexian who put these implants in the zombie, and they're able to revive him, but they control his movements. I guess this got reprinted with zoomed in with the Fat Phyrexian. Disciple of Grace, showing a lot of skin here for a disciple. She has protection from black and cycling. Beauty is beyond law. Disciple of Law, a religious order for religious order. Protection from red, 1/2. Discordant Dirge for 5 mana. During your upkeep, put a verse counter on it. You can pay a black and sacrifice it to look at target opponent's hand and choose up to X cards, where X is the number of verse counters on it. That player discards those cards. Fortunately, since it costs 5 mana, the opponent's most likely just going to have a few cards left, and when they see this card cast, they're most likely going to want to play out their entire hand before you end up getting enough dirge counters on the card. Because the turn you play it, you don't even get a counter on it, so your opponent gets at least one turn to react to it. Disenchant, reprinted to destroy an artifact or an enchantment. Let Phyrexia breed evil in the darkness. My holy light will reveal its taint. Quote from Sarah. Disorder. Disorder! Disorder! Deals 2 damage to each white creature and each player who controls a white creature. That was from Toxicity from System of a Down. Then, just when the other guys were winning, the sky threw up. Jula the Goblin Raider. These poor Pegasus are getting hit with destructive fire and lightning. Disruptive Student. I'm pretty sure this is Teferi again as a kid. Oh, yeah, it is. Teferi is a problem student. Always late for class. No appreciation for constructive use of time. Which is ironic because he ends up being a master of time when he grows up. You can tap him to counter target spell unless its caster pays an additional 1. Could be pretty good if your opponent has to tap all their lands. Douse. Blue enchantment, and at any time you can pay 2 to counter a red spell. The Academy's libraries were protected by fire prevention spells. Even after the disaster, the books were intact, though forever sealed in time. This is a blue card that hoses red. Because once red runs out of cards to draw, it's almost dead in the water. Dragon Blood. It's an artifact. You pay 3 and tap it to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Fire in the blood, fire in the belly. I use this card a lot with a lot of +1/+1 counter strategies, especially with the spikes that are in the Tempest and Stronghold and Exodus sets. In the future, there will be other creatures that use +1/+1 counters, and Dragon Blood just keeps them alive. Drifting Djinn, 6 mana, 5/5 flying. During your upkeep, you must pay 2 mana or sacrifice the Djinn. And it has cycling. Not really. I mean, I've seen it used before when my friends were playing, but I personally wouldn't ever use the card. I don't like that you have to pay 2 for a 5/5 flying. Child of Gaia is just way better. It's stronger, has regeneration. Drifting Meadow. It comes in play taps. It taps for a white, and it has cycling. Dromasaur. 3 mana, 2/3 lizard. Oh no, it got changed to a dinosaur. I thought so. Whenever Dromasaur blocks or becomes blocked, it gets +2/-2 until end of turn, which will make it a 4/1. They say dromasaurs are frightened of dogs, even little ones. There are no dogs in Sheev, not even little ones. Duress. Look at target opponent's hand and choose a non-creature, non-land card. That player discards that card. We decide who is worthy of our works. Gix, the Yawgmoth Praetor. These 1 mana discard spells are really great on the first turn. Even if the opponent doesn't have any of this selected cards based on the discard spell, you being able to see all the cards in your opponent's hand is another advantage that you get, because now you're not going to be surprised by any of their instants or sorceries they might have. Or if you see they have kill spells, you might not want to play your best creature right away. You might want to play your lesser creatures to bait them into using their kill spells. That way your game-winning creature can survive. Eastern Paladin, 4 mana 3/3. You pay 2 black and tap it to destroy target green creature. Their fragile world, their feudal lives, they obstruct the grand evolution. In Yawgmoth's name, we shall excise them. Oath of the East. Electrite, 5 mana beast. Looks like a trilobite. When Electrite successfully deals combat damage to defending player, Electrite deals damage equal to its power to each blocking creature. So if the opponent does not block the Electrite's going to deal its damage to all creatures that did block your other creatures, if any. Shivan inhabitants are hardened to fire, so their predators have developed alternative weaponry. Elite Archers, 6 mana for a 3/3. Tap them to deal 3 damage to target attacking or blocking creature. Arrows fletched with the feathers of angels seldom miss their mark. 6 mana is a lot. And by that point, if you're tapping to deal 3 damage to an attacking or blocking creature, it's still a lot of damage to do to an attacking or blocking creature, but it is too situational for my taste. Their power and toughness do not really justify the 6 mana, in my opinion. Elvish Herder for 1 green, 1/1. Pay a green, target creature gains trample until end of turn. Before Urza and Mishra came to Argoth, the herders prevented their creatures from stampeding. During the war, they encouraged it. I forgot about this card. It's really good to get your big creatures that don't have trample. This is a good way to give them that. Elvish Lyrist for a green. Tap it, sacrifice it to destroy target enchantment. Bring the spear of ancient briar. Bring the torch to light the pyre. Bring the one who trod our ground. Bring the spade to dig his mound. Enchantment alteration. Move target enchantment from one creature to another or from one land to another. The enchantment's new target must be legal, which means that you can only do creature to creature, land to land, and you can't put it on a creature that has protection from the certain color. You can't put it on a creature that can't be target spells or abilities. In the artwork, we see a frog and a fairy. The fairy's wings got moved to the frog, and some of the frog's spots got put onto the fairy. Endless Worm, 5 mana, 9/9 trample. That's really good. During your upkeep, sacrifice an enchantment, or you must sacrifice the worm. Ages ago, a party of elves took cover to let one pass. They're still waiting. Really powerful green creature. But you do need an enchantment every turn to sacrifice. Otherwise, it'll die. However, with so many enchantments that return to your hand after going to the graveyard, like Brilliant Halo, for instance, that solves the problem. As long as you cast the Halo every turn, you can even put it on the worm itself, and then the worm becomes a 10/11 with trample, and you're going to attack with it if the opponent doesn't destroy it. And then next turn, sacrifice the Halo goes back to your hand, and recast the Halo. Rinse and repeat. In Urza's Legacy, which is set after this, there's a green enchantment that goes back to your hand called Rancor, which is probably one of the best creature enchantments in the game because it gives them +2 power and trample. So you don't even have to run 2 colors if you want to. That's the best enchantment to run with Endless Worm. Crater Hellion's still the favorite, though. Surprisingly, I thought the worm would be a little bit more money. Endoskeleton. For 2 mana, you may choose not to untap Endoskeleton during your untap step. Pay 2, tap it, target creature gets +3 toughness for as long as the Endoskeleton remains tapped. Now, in the artwork, this is Urza's brother Mishra. During their fight, Urza did an energy blast to Mishra, and he saw that Mishra's body had been damaged in this way, and this is where he sees the Phyrexian organs and the endoskeleton of the Phyrexian surgery. And he knew his brother was no longer mortal. Energy Field, 2 mana enchantment. Prevent all damage dealt to you from sources you do not control. If a card is put into your graveyard, you must sacrifice Energy Field. I've used it. I've used this card a lot. It kind of makes you immortal, where your opponent can't damage you. But you have to make sure nothing goes to your graveyard. If the opponent uses a card that causes you to discard a card, or mill the top card of your library, or destroys one of your creatures with an instant or sorcerer, or even destroys a land or an artifact, then the energy field dies as well. Exhaustion. 3 mana, creatures and lands target opponent control do not untap during his or her next untap step. They might as well skip their turn, especially if they tapped all their lands the turn prior. They won't be able to use any spells for the next turn. The mage felt as though he'd been in the stasis suit for days. Upon his return, he found it was months. Exhume, one of my favorite creature recursion cards. For 2 mana, each player chooses a creature card in his or her graveyard and puts it directly into play. Death, an outmoded concept. We sleep and we change. Citric the Birth Priest. Like the artwork, it shows machine claws ripping corpses out of the ground. I assume to either revive them, hence the creature resurrection in the spell itself. You do have to be careful because the opponent gets to revive a creature as well. But like I said, with carrion beetles, I would empty their graveyard to make sure they didn't have any creatures to revive while I end up getting them back. Never seen this card. Exploration. For 1 green, you may play an additional land each turn. That's really good. The first explorers found Argoth, a storehouse of natural wealth. Towering forests grown over rich veins of ore. Oh, $30 card from urza'ssaga. Expunge. This was one of my favorite removal spells back in the day. Destroy target non-artifact, non-black creature. That creature cannot be regenerated this turn, and it has cycling. So if you're against another black deck or a deck that uses artifact creatures, Expunge can't destroy them, but it has cycling, so you can discard the card to draw a new card. It's not a, quote, dead card in your hand. And the artwork's cool because it shows an angel got a black missile or firebolt through his body, and he's been destroyed. Faith Healer. I forgot about this card. 2 mana cleric. Sacrifice an enchantment to gain life equal to the sacrifice enchantment's casting cost. Power of Faith is quiet. It is a leaf unmoved by the hurricane. Again, you could combo Brilliant Halo with this card. Sacrifice Brilliant Halo, gain 2 life. The Halo goes back to your hand. Recast, rinse, and repeat. Falter. Creatures without flying cannot block this turn. Like a sleeping dragon, Sheaf stirs and groans at times, and it shows another battle between the goblins and the Vishino, as they're holding on because the ground is shifting. Fault Line. Here we have Vishino. Yeah, these are Vishino because they're lizards. Fault Line deals X damage to each creature without flying and each player. So it's an earthquake that costs 1 red mana more, but it is an instant, and that definitely makes the card really, really good. We live on the serpent's back, Vishino's saying, because the ground is always moving. Fecundity. 3 mana. Whenever a creature is put into a graveyard from play, that creature's controller may draw a card. Life is eternal. A lifetime is ephemeral. Good if you have a lot of sacrifice strategies or where your creatures go to the graveyard a lot. You're going to be drawing a lot of cards. Fertile Ground. 2 mana enchantment. When that goes on a land, whenever enchanted land taps for mana, it produces an additional mana of any color. The forest was too lush for the brothers to despoil. Almost. Unfortunately, the forest not only did it get picked apart for its resources, but a lot of it was involved with the war, and a lot of the weapons were used, destroyed the landscape. Fiery Mantle. It gives the fire-breathing ability, where for each red you pay, the creature gets power +1. And when the mantle goes to the graveyard, you can return it to its owner's hand. We have a Viyoshino here who has a fire armor. Fire ants, 3 mana, 2/1. Tap them. Fire ants deal 1 damage to each other creature without flying. Visitors to Sheev fear the dragons, the goblins, or the Viyoshino. Natives fear the ants. The artwork is really good. I don't know if this soldier died to the ants themselves, but it just shows the ants picking his body clean of the meat. And the full moon in the background is just a nice touch. The artwork is really good, but Crater Hellion's still my favorite. Oh, I didn't know that they got alternate art of fire ants here. They're biting this goblin or merfolk because he has webbed digits. Flesh Reaver, 2 mana, 4/4. When Flesh Reaver successfully deals damage to a creature or an opponent, Flesh Reaver also deals that same amount of damage to you. Though the Reaver is horrifyingly effective, its dorsal vent spit a highly corrosive cloud of filth. The artwork on this card reminds me of Tremors 2, where they were, I think they were called Shriekers. If you've never seen Tremors 2, I do highly recommend it if you like the Tremors series. The artwork is really good. The card itself, 2 mana, 4/4. It's also going to hit you for 4 every time it does damage, period. So unless you build your deck around it, you can give it, if you give it lifelink, you'll gain 4 life, and then it'll do 4 damage to you, but then you're going to gain 4 more life back. So giving it lifelink, I think, is the best way to make it really good. Fluctuator. Cycling costs you up to 2 less to do, which means most cards cycle for just 2 mana, so this means you can cycle the cards for free. Fico summoned only a Togs for 3 straight sessions. The tutor couldn't decide whether to punish his failure or praise his consistency. What that has to do with cycling, I do not know. Fog Bank. One of my favorite walls in the game. It's a 0/2 with flying. It does not deal or receive combat damage. So almost all the time it's going to survive blocking creatures all day long. The artwork shows some velociraptors, and they can't really get through this fog. Here's a forest. You can see how fertile and enchanted it is. Here's more opening in the sky. Here we have these almost looks like underwater coral, but this is how fertile this forest was and rich with resources. And here we're more deeper in it with a fallen tree that looks like a log bridge now. Fortitude. When Fortitude is put in a graveyard from play, return it to its owner's hand. Sacrifice the forest to regenerate an enchanted creature. Probably one of the weaker reoccurring creature enchantments. Gaia's Bounty. Search your library for up to 2 forests, reveal them, and put them into your hand. Shuffle your library afterwards. This is good because if you're stuck with only 3 land and you need more, this ensures you get to 5. The forest grew back so quickly that lumbering machines were suspended in the treetops. Gaia's Cradle. A legendary land. You can tap it to add 1 green mana to your mana pool for each creature you control. Here sprouted the first seedlings of Argoth. Here the last tree will fall. Gamelin, the Centennial Elder. So if you have 5 creatures out on the field, you can tap this and you get 5 green to your mana pool. Probably one of the best lands in the game. And I do own one. And it's a very valuable card nowadays. Ooh, that's nice. $828. This card's almost $1,000. I don't know if I could ever bear to part with it, though. But that's how good it is. Gaia's Embrace. 4 mana. Enchanted creature gets +3/+3 and trample, and you can pay a green to regenerate the enchanted creature. We have a druid in here, and he has enchanted himself with this giant oaken armor, and he's smashing this Phyrexian to pieces along with his stones. Or more. No, this is a tree limb. The forest rose to the battle, not to save the people, but to save itself. Gamble for 1 red. Search your library for a card. Put that card into your hand. Then discard a card at random. Shuffle your library afterwards. When you've got nothing, you might as well trade it for something else. It's showing this goblin. I don't know if he's just trying to like cross this. I guess he's in a pit and he's trying to leap from a lower end to a higher end. But if he trips, he's gonna fall to his death. It's a gamble he's taking. Gilded Drake, 2 mana for a 3/3 flying. When Gilded Drake comes into play, exchange control of it and target creature that your opponent controls. Or sacrifice the Gilded Drake. Buyer beware. So, by itself, this card's like, you're giving your opponent a 3/3 creature with flying for 2 mana, so you never really want to play this card early in the game. But you get to steal one of your opponent's creatures. You're forcing a trade. And what I would do with this card is I would cast the Drake, switch with whatever creature I wanted from them. Then I would use cards that say return target creature to its owner's hand. I would return the Drake back to my hand. You get to still keep the creature that you stole from your opponent. And then you can just play the Drake again and swap it with something else. And keep doing it as long as you have like creature return spells. Like Capsize with buyback. And I didn't realize that it's a $250 card. That's pretty good. Glorious Anthem. All creatures you control get +1/+1. Once heard, the battle song of an angel becomes part of the listener forever. Goblin Cadets. For 1 green, whenever they block or become blocked, target opponent gains control of them. This removes them from combat. If you kids don't stop that racket, I'm turning this expedition around right now. Probably these goblins aren't so good. Very outdated. Goblin Lackey. When Goblin Lackey successfully deals damage to a player, you may choose a goblin in your hand and put it directly into play. All bark, someone else's bite. One of the best goblins in the game. On the first turn, you cast the Lackey. On the second turn, you attack with it. If the opponent doesn't have anything, any goblin in your hand you can cast for free. This includes changelings that have the shapeshifters that have the changeling ability. They're all creature types at all times, so you can put them directly onto the battlefield as well. There are goblins that cost 6 mana, like Siege, or 5 mana, Siege Gang Commander. He comes out for free. He comes out with 3/1/1s. Like, Goblin Lackey can really win you the game as long as you have really good goblins to throw out on the field if it gets through. Goblin Matron. When it comes into play, you may search your library for a goblin card and put it in your hand. There's always room for 1 more. Goblin Offensive. For 3 and X, put X goblin tokens into play. Treat these tokens as 1/1 red creatures. They certainly are. It's a joke saying that goblins are offensive. Goblin Patrol. 1 green for I messed up the color. 1 red for a 2/1. This is better than Goblins Cadets. They do have Echo though, but 1 red for a 2/1 is really good. It's like Jackal Pup without the drawback. The Echo is the only drawback. Take the sharp metal stick and make a lot of holes. Jewel of the Goblin Raider. Goblin Raider, 2 mana 2/2, cannot block. Not a good goblin. He was proud to wear the lizard skin around his waist just for the fun of annoying the enemy. And their enemy being the Viashino. Goblin Spelunker, 3 mana 2/2 with Mountain Walk. It only short jump. You go first. Aye! Really? We go different way now. It's funny flavor text. Goblin War Buggy. 2 mana 2/2. They can attack as soon as they enter the battlefield, but they also have Echo. But it's pretty good. At least you get one attack, and if you decide not to pay the Echo cost. Gorilla Warrior, 3 mana for a 3/2, no other ability. The gorilla beat its chest and threw the great handful of leaves into the air. It howled challenge and showed its teeth. The mechanical soldier, not understanding, simply killed it. Crafted Skullcap for 4 mana. During your draw step, you get to draw an additional card. However, at the end of your turn, you have to discard your entire hand. So you better make sure that you're able to cast all the spells in your hand if you don't want to lose them. Let go your mind. Mine is Fitter. Gix, the Yawgmoth Predator. Greater Good. So this tree folk died fighting this Phyrexian, but it did save these elves. 4 mana, you sacrifice a creature, draw cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power, but then you have to choose and discard 3 cards after. So the stronger the creature you sacrifice, the more cards you get to draw and keep. We have more sprouts than they have hands. Gambling the Centennial Elder. Great Whale, 7 mana, 5/5. When it enters the battlefield, you get to untap up to 7 lands. Meaning as long as you have 7 mana, it's free to play and you can play something else afterwards. As a great whale dies, it flips onto its back, and so an island is born. Mariner's Legend. The artwork is very good. I love the card. Do I like it better than Crater Hellion? I'm going to have to say yes. Great Whale is currently my favorite. Greener Pastures. During each player's upkeep, if that player controls more lands than any other player, that player puts a sapling token onto the battlefield. Treat this as a 1/1 green creature. The fact that it helps your opponent out if they have more lands than you, I don't like it. Guma. 3 mana 2/2, protect from blue. When the giant returned for the night, he found a dead merfolk on his pillow. Although he praised the little Guma, he inwardly wondered where she had hid the head. That's gruesome. Hawk Eater Moth. 4 mana for a 1/2 flying, cannot be targeted spells or abilities. Each day at dusk, the birds above the canopy grow silent. I don't like that it costs 4 and it's just a 1/2, but it has flying and not a lot of green creatures do have flying. Headlong Rush. All attacking creatures gain first strike until end of turn. That could wipe out a whole all the blockers with the right creatures. A landslide of goblins poured down toward the defenders, tumbling, rolling, and bouncing their way down the steep hillside. Reeves Viashino got ambushed. Healing Salve gets reprinted, showing a Sarah Angel helping Xantcha out. Xantcha is recovering. The medicine is slow, but my magic would have killed her. Sarah to Urza. Heat Ray for 1 red and X, deal X damage to any target creature, and it's an instant, so you can do it at any time. It's not known whether the Thrawn built the device to forge their wonders or to defend them. Herald of Sarah, 4 mana, 3/4 flying, echo, and vigilance. Outdated, but back then it was pretty good. Hermetic Study, enchanted creature gains tap it. This deals 1 damage to target creature or player. Books can be replaced. A prize student cannot. Be patient. So it showed this one wizard attempting to cast, I assume, some sort of lava or fire spell. And he did it, but his aim was a bit off, and he had almost shot this student, but he ended up just frying this side of a tome. So it must have went whoosh that way. Hermetic Study, I comboed with Horseshoe Crab, which we'll see very soon. Hibernation. 3 mana, return all green permanents to their owner's hand. It shows some sleeping pangolin pigs. On its way to the cave, the armadillo brushed by a sapling. It awoke to find a full-grown tree blocking its path. Hidden Ancients. 2 mana enchantment. When one of your opponents successfully casts an enchantment spell, if the hidden agents are still an enchantment, the ancients become a 5/5 tree folk. The only alert the invaders had was the rustling of leaves on a day without wind. These, I assume, no, I'm not assuming. I know here we have soldiers. He's attempting to cut wood from this tree, but they have angry faces, and these guys are in for a bad day. Hidden Guerrillas. When one of your opponents successfully casts an artifact, if they're an enchantment, they become a 5/3 soldier with trample. They want to ambush this bulldozer. Hidden Herd. When one of your opponents plays a non-basic land, the Hidden Herd becomes a 3/3 beast. And we just see a herd of some sort hiding in the grass. Hidden Predators. Well, these look cool. Whenever your opponents cast a creature with power 4 or greater, Hidden Predators becomes a 4/4 beast as well. Hidden Spider. When your opponent casts a creature with flying, the Hidden Spider becomes a 3/5 spider that can block creatures with flying. It wants only to dress you in silk. Hidden Stag. Through all these branches, we get a close-up of a stag. When one of your opponents plays a land, Hidden Stag becomes a 3/2 beast. When you play a land, if Hidden Stag is a creature, you can turn back and do an enchantment. I don't really care for a lot of the hidden cards, though. Hollow Dogs. 5 mana for a 3/3. Whenever they attack, they get power +2 until end of turn. So, realistically, you're getting 5 mana for a 5/3 as long as it's attacking. A Hollow Dog is never empty. It is filled with thirst for the hunt. These are Phyrexian dogs, so they don't look like your regular Fido. Hopping Automaton. 3 mana 2/2. For free, it can gain flying, but it becomes a 1/1 until end of turn. Or -1/-1 until end of turn. Designed to carry equipment across rivers, the Hopping Automaton was soon pressed into service in the infantry. Horseshoe Crab. It's a 3 mana 1/3, and its only ability is you pay a blue and untap it. In the final days before the disaster, all the crabs on Teleria migrated from inlets, streams, and ponds back to the sea. No one took note. The disaster was a huge explosion that I mentioned earlier that trapped a lot of students in different time zones and time warps. Horseshoe Crab I comboed with Hermetic Study. That was a few cards ago where enchanted creature, you can tap it to do 1 damage to any target. I built a deck where I put the Hermetic Study on Horseshoe Crab, and for every blue that I was able to pay, I got to deal 1 damage to any target. I would machine gun my opponent's creatures, or sometimes their life total directly. Horseshoe Crab I do like better because of a memorable deck that I made. It was my first blue deck. My second blue deck, because my first blue deck was the Sea Serpents with the whole island home and turning my opponent's lands into islands, or hoping they were playing blue to begin with. Humble. This is a really good card for white. Target creature loses all abilities and becomes a 0/1 creature until end of turn. That means if they're indestructible or have regeneration, Humble takes those abilities away from them. If they're a 20/20 creature with Burst Strike, Humble turns it into a 0/1 creature with no abilities. It is not your place to rule Radiant. It may not even be mine. Here, Radiant is trying to rebel against Sarah, but Sarah is still telling Radiant, calm down. You're not in charge here. Hush, destroy all enchantments for 2, cycling. Ill-gotten gains. I forgot. Here we have Zancha. She was going to be a sleeper agent for the Phyrexians, but Urza rescued her on his first assault in Phyrexia before he succumbed to madness. I think she stole a power stone from one of the Phyrexian rigs, but I could be wrong. Remove ill-gotten gains from the game. All players discard their hands, and each player puts up to 3 cards from their graveyard back into their hand. Urza thought it was a crusade. Zancha knew it was a robbery. Imaginary pet. 2 mana 4/4. During your upkeep, if you have a card in your hand, you must return the pet to your hand. It followed me home. Can I keep it? Here we have a bear illusion that this kid. We know kids they have like imaginary friends. Imagine if it was a real a bear. Intrepid hero. It's fighting this Phyrexian. 3 mana 1/1. Tap him, destroy target creature power 4 or greater. We each have our own strengths, Radiant, Sarah said with a sly smile. If all of my people were like this one, who would carry your scrolls? Here's an island. Shows lightning going across these. Here's a more peaceful look. I believe this is Teleria. Here's it from a different point of view. And the mirror, another point of view. So it looks like they circled the island at various times of the day, which I think is pretty cool. Pretty neat. Jagged Lightning. For 5, Jagged Lightning deals 3 damage to target creature and 3 damage to another target creature. The pungent smell of roasting flesh made both mages realize they'd rather break for dinner than fight. I guess they're about to fight, but the lightning hit and it fried all 4 of them. This imp and this snake are dead, and these 2 were lucky enough to just get roasted. Here's Karn, the Silver Golem. For 5 mana, he's a 4/4. If he blocks or becomes blocked, he gets -4/+4 into end of turn, which will make him a 0/8. Karn doesn't want to kill anything. He's a gentle giant, so to speak. So if he blocks or becomes blocked, he's not going to really kill any creature. He has a more powerful effect where you pay 1 mana, target non-creature artifact, becomes an artifact creature with power and toughness equal to its casting cost until end of turn. There's a combo. There's an artifact in a later set called Mycosith Lattice, which makes all cards in play artifacts, including lands. So then you can pay Karn's ability and target your opponent's lands. The land becomes an artifact. It doesn't have a casting cost. It becomes a 0/0, and their land will die. And you can do that to each of their lands. And as long as you have Karn and the Lattice out, they're never going to be able to have a land out on the field, and it's good game after that. How much is original Karn? 15. Launch. Enchanted creature gains flying. When launch goes to the graveyard, return it back to your hand. These wizards are jumping off a cliff, learning how to fly. Lay waste. Destroy target land, or you can cycle it. Lifeline. This is a powerful artifact. Whenever a creature is put into a graveyard, if there's still a creature in play, return the creature that died back to play at the end of the turn. There are a lot of combos with this card, especially with creatures that when they enter the battlefield, the effects will trigger each turn. $22. Lightning Dragon. 4 mana, 4/4, flying and echo, and it has fire breathing. I wish it had haste, but it's outdated by today's standards. But I love the artwork. The dragon looks cool. It looks unique. It's made by illustrated by Ron Spencer. I like that it's coming from a bolt of lightning, and the point of view is you're seeing it from above. Lightning Dragon's I'm gonna like better than Horseshoe Crab, and I think Lightning Dragon, if my memory serves correctly, is my favorite creature and card from the urza'ssaga set. But we'll find out, because we're almost halfway done. Lifting Refrain. During your upkeep, put a verse counter on it. Sacrifice it to counter target spell unless this caster pays X, where X is the number of verse counters on it. Again, like with Discordant Dirge, the opponent sees it coming and they can play around it. Lingering Mirage. Enchanted land is an island. Birds frozen in flight. Sea turned to glass. Teleria hidden in a mirror. That's from the huge time explosion. It froze some sections of the sea to where the waves don't even move, and the birds are frozen in time. Looming Shade. I remember this card. It looks like a skeleton, more like a skeleton than a shade that is just covered with a cloak. Looming Shade gets +1/+1 for each black that you pay. The shade tracks victims by reverberations of the pipes as a spider senses prey tangling in its trembled web. Definitely not something I'd want to run into in the sewers. Lotus Blossom. I did not know this existed. For 2, during upkeep, put a counter on it. Sacrifice it, add X mana of any one color to your mana pool, where X is the number of petal counters on it. That's cool. Lull. Creatures deal no combat damage this turn. It has cycling. Beautiful art. Lurking Evil. This looks like a weird mosquito thing. For triple black, it's an enchantment. At any time, you can pay half of your life total, rounded up. Lurking Evil becomes a 4/4 creature with flying that counts as a horror. I don't know if it's worth half your life to do. Mana Leech. You may choose not to untap them during your untap step. Tap them to tap target land. That land does not untap as long as Mana Leeches is tapped. And these are the sickest leeches I've ever seen. Meltdown. For an X in red, destroy each artifact with total casting cost X or less. Catastrophes happen so often at the mana rig that the Viashino language had a special word to describe them. Metronome. And this is a play on words because these are actual gnomes. And it's built, the scepter's going to go back and forth against this and go tick, 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 tick. When a spell or ability one of your opponent's controls causes you to discard Metronome, put 4 gnome tokens into play. Treat these as 1/1 artifact creatures. Or you could just pay 4 and tap it to put a gnome token into play. Treat it as a 1/1 artifact creature. It's more as a sideboard card against discard strategies. Midsummer Revel. During upkeep, put a verse counter on it. You can pay a green and sacrifice it to put X beast tokens onto the battlefield. Treat these tokens as 3/3 creatures. And you get X tokens where X is the number of verse counters that was on it. Mishra's Helix. For 5, pay X and tap it. Tap X lands. The Helix was the finest example of Mishra's campaign strategy. If you couldn't have Argoth, nobody could. If you have a lot of mana to cast, you could lock your opponent out every turn as long as you had more mana than they had lands. Mobile Fort. I forgot about this card. For 4 mana, it's a 0/6. It's a wall. You can pay 3 colorless to give it +3/-1 until end of turn, so that would make it a 3/5. And then this wall can attack it as though it weren't a wall until end of turn when you use that ability. Monk Idealist. 3 mana 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, return target enchantment card from your graveyard to your hand. Belief is the strongest mortar. Monk Realist. When he comes into play, he destroys target enchantment. We plant the seeds of doubt to harvest the crops of wisdom. Alright, I think we're over the halfway point now. Morphling. For 5 mana, it's a 3/3. You can pay blue to untap it. You can pay blue to give it flying into end of turn. You can pay blue to where it can't be charged spells or abilities until end of turn. And you can pay a colorless to manipulate its power and toughness, giving it +1/-1 or -1/+1 as the situation needs. Here's Mountains of Sheev. Here's some water here and down here, but see the red hot air from the mountains. We're deeper in the range. This is more peaks, and there's like fog below because I believe there's water down here. These are coastal mountains. Sheev is on a coast. And a different set of mountains. Noetic Scales. For 4. During each player's upkeep, return to its owner's hand each creature that player controls with power greater than the number of cards in their hand. Good against big creatures. No Rest for the Wicked. For 2, sacrifice it. Return to your hand all creatures that died this turn. The Soul. Here we have no use for such frivolities. Citric the Birth Priest. There ain't no rest for the wicked. Auk. 2 mana. That's a big goblin. Auk cannot attack unless a creature with greater power also attacks. Damn, that sucks. He also cannot block unless a creature with greater power also blocks. Yeah, this card sucks. Oh, I forgot about Opal Acrolith. It's an enchantment. When one of your opponents successfully casts a creature spell, Opal Acrolith becomes a 2/4 guardian. At any time, you can turn Opal Acrolith back into an enchantment. So if it would die in combat, you can turn it into an enchantment for nothing, and because it's not a creature anymore, it won't go to the graveyard. Opal Archangel. When one of your opponents successfully casts a creature spell, Opal Archangel becomes a 5/5 creature with flying, and attacking does not cause it to tap. See, these sleeper enchantments, as I like to call them, I think the white ones are better than the green ones. Do I have it on? I'm just going to see. I hope the chat didn't freeze on me again. Looks like it didn't. Okay. That happened during my Stronghold stream. Opal Carotid. When one of your opponents successfully casts a creature spell, Opal Carotid becomes a 2/2 soldier. Opal Gargoyle. When your opponent successfully casts a creature spell, it becomes a 2/2 gargoyle with flying. Opal Titan. Probably the best one. One of your opponents casts a creature spell, Opal Titan becomes a 4/4 giant that has protection from each of the creature's colors that were cast, giving you a advantage right off the bat. Oppression for 3. Whenever a player successfully casts a spell, that player chooses and discards a card. Do not presume to speak for yourself. Gix to Xantia. And we have a close-up of what Gix looked like. Order of Yawgmoth is a cool Phyrexian knight. He has like a scythe. And here's his head. Back when I first had the card, I thought he had like a maggot or a fly head, and this was his respirator. But I think this is his actual head here, and the rest is just like his Phyrexian body. He can't be blocked except by artifact and black creatures. When he successfully deals combat damage to a player, that player chooses and discards a card. Outmaneuver. X target block creatures deal combat damage to the defending player instead of to blocking creatures this turn. So this makes those creatures kind of unblockable. Push one goblin into sight and run a lot. That's tactics. Jewel of the Goblin Raider. Pacifism gets reprinted. Fight, I cannot. I do not care if I live or die, so as long as I can rest. This is Urza taking off his power armor. He goes to Sarah to heal after his first trip to Phyrexia. Parasitic Bond. During the upkeep of Enchanted Creature's controller, Parasitic Bond deals 2 damage to that player. All bonds are parasitic. Only rulership is pure. Gix the Yawgmoth Predator. Pariah. This is a good enchantment. Redirect to Enchanted Creature all damage dealt to you. You can put it on your opponent's creature to maybe it'll stop them from attacking you, or it could even kill one of their dangerous creatures. Or you could put it on one of your creatures and let's say it has protection. Depending on the color your opponent is playing, all the damage will be redirected to them and that damage will be reduced to 0. Meaning you cannot be killed as long as that creature survives or the enchantment is still there. It is not sad Radiant chided the Lesser Angel. It is right. Every society must have its outcasts. Path of Peace. It shows this soldier, he threw down his shield and his swords, and he's walking away. Destroy target creature. That creature's controller gains 4 life. When the sword becomes a burden, let the warrior lay it aside that another with a truer heart might take it up. Radiant the Archangel. It's like a poor man's swords to plowshares. Pegasus Charger. 3 mana 2/1 with flying and first strike. The clouds came alive and dove to the earth. Hooves flashed among the dark army who fled before the spectacle of fury. I liked Pegasus Charger. Pendrel Drake, 4 mana 2/3 flying with cycling. The mages of Teleria found strange ways to spend their free time. Occasionally they had contests to see whose kite was eaten last. Pendrel Flux. Enchanted creature gains during your upkeep. Pay that creature's casting cost or sacrifice it. So this gives an enchanted creature echo, so to speak, but every turn. Devoured by the mists, Teleria was stuck in time, trapped between 2 eternal heartbeats. Peregrine Drake, 5 mana for a 2/3 flying. When it comes into play, untap up to 5 lands. That the Tolarian Mists parted for the Drakes was warning enough to stay away. Persecute. Choose a color. Look into our player's hand. That player discards all cards of the chosen color. Definitely punishing if they're only playing one color. My finest warrior was lost to the Phyrexians. I pray that Lady Selenia died honorably. Selenia was the dark angel that Volrath. Wait, no. Yes. That's weird. Because Selenia wouldn't come around until later on in the future from urza'ssaga. I gotta find that out if there's any info on that. My favorite artwork for Pestilence. It shows these Phyrexian witch engines walking across the field, spreading all these flies, and they are biting all these poor people. At the end of turn, if no creatures are in play, you must sacrifice Pestilence. For every black that you pay, you do 1 damage to all creatures and players. Be careful you don't kill yourself with it. Phyrexian Colossus, 7 mana for an 8/8. If it's a Colossus, I think it should have Trample. It doesn't untap during your untap step. You have to pay 8 life to untap it. It cannot be blocked by less than 3 creatures. I just think it should have Trample. I don't like the fact that you have to pay 8 life to untap it. You'd probably be better off using other artifacts to untap it. I forgot about this card. Phyrexian Ghoul, 3 mana 2/2. At any time you can sacrifice a creature. Phyrexian Ghoul gets +2/+2 into end of turn. Phyrexia wastes nothing. Its food chain is a spiraling cycle. Here's the Phyrexian Processor I spoke about that you could combo with Angelic Course. This is how they make their sleeper agents. They kidnap an original person. Here, this girl got kidnapped. It was an elf. And they're using her body, they're copying her DNA, and they made a clone of her, which will be a sleeper agent. It will take her spot, and she will most likely be killed and turned into a Phyrexian herself, or her blood would be used as fuel for their machines. Phyrexian Tower, you can tap it to add for a colorless, or you can sacrifice a creature to add for 2 black. Living metal encasing dying flesh. Pit Trap. This gets reprinted. Pay 2, tap it, sacrifice it, destroy target attack creature without flying. That creature can't be regenerated this turn. The Ocean Soldiers were designed to fight, not to watch their feet. Here's the floating planes in the sky. In Sarah's realm, a lot of it was just like a picture of heaven, and the planes was just a bunch of like floating islands in a heaven sky. Because it was an artificial plane, it wasn't a true world. And these are just different variations of the floating planes. Planar Birth. Put all basic lands from all graveyards into play under their owner's controls tapped. From Womb of Nothingness sprang this place of beauty, purity, and hope realized. Song of All, Canto the Third. The Planeswalker Sarah is creating her artificial plane right here. Planar Void. When a card is put into a graveyard, remove that card from the game. Planeswalking isn't about walking, it's about falling and screaming. Xantcha, the Phyrexian Outcast. Here, Urza and Xantcha are trying to planeswalk away from Phyrexia. Polluted Mire comes into play tap. Could tap for a black, or you could cycle it. Pouncing Jaguar, 2/2 for 1 green with Echo. 1 pounce, she's hungry, and you die quickly. 2, she's teaching her cubs, and you're in for a long day. Love the card. Power Sync, pay a blue and X. This is reprinted. Counter target spell unless this controller pays X. He or she cannot tap all lands that they produce and empty their mana pool. Power Taint. During the upkeep of enchanted enchantments controller, that player pays 2 colorless or loses 2 life. And this also has cycling. Presence of the Master. Whenever player plays an enchantment spell, you counter it. Peace to all, peace be all. Great Hall Floor Inscription. This says once this is out, nobody else is playing any more enchantments. Priest of Gix, 3 mana 2/1. When he comes into play, add 3 black to your mana pool. So he kind of comes out for free, as long as you have 3 starting off. Gix doesn't want a people to rule, but puppets to entertain his madness. Xantcha, the Phyrexian Outcast. Priest of Titania, one of the best elves in the game because she taps for 1 green for each elf in play. Titania rewards all those who honor the forest by making them a living part of it. Purging Scythe. During your upkeep, Purging Scythe deals 2 damage to the creature with the lowest toughness. If 2 or more creatures are tied for the lowest toughness, you decide which creature the Scythe deals the damage to. And they're definitely purging the weak with this Scythe. Reign of Filth. Each land you control gains sacrifice this land, add 1 black mana to your mana pool until end of turn. When I say it rained, it was not small drops, but thick, greasy drool pouring from the heavens. And we have a hollow dog here behind the Phyrexian trees. I assume that's where they were at. Rain Assault destroyed 2 target lands, but it's expensive. It is for 6. Here, rain does not wash the land. It desiccates it. Ravenous Scourge. 3 mana for a 1/1 flying. Whenever it attacks, it gets +2 power until end of turn, making it a 3/1. Hunger is a kind of madness, and here all madness flourishes. Speaking of hunger, I am hungry. Can't wait to eat after the stream. Raise for a red. At any time you play Raise, or when you cast Raise, you must sacrifice a land to destroy target land. The Vishnu believe that the oldest mountains hate everyone equally. Recantation. It's a verse counter, and you can return up to X target permanents to their owner's hand, where X is the number of verse counters on it when you sacrifice it. Reclusive White. For 4 mana, it's a 4/4. During your upkeep, if you control any other non-land permanents, you must sacrifice Reclusive White. There are places so horrible that even the dead hide their faces. The fact that you can't have any other cards out on the field besides lands, I don't think it justifies 4 mana for a 4/4. He doesn't even have flying or trample or anything like that to make him better. Redeem. Prevent all damage to 1 or 2 creatures. That they are saved from death is immaterial. What is important is that they know the source of their benefaction. Radiant the Archangel. Radiant is constantly questioning Sarah's judgment. Reflexes. For a red, enchanted creature gains first strike. Here's how you win. Don't let the other guy hit back first. More wisdom from Jula the Goblin Raider. Rejuvenate. 4 mana to gain 6 life, or you can cycle it. Guy's taking a refreshing dip. Remembrance. Whenever a non-token creature dies, you may search your library for a copy of that creature card and put it into your hand. Shuffle your library afterwards. This is only good if you have decks that have multiple creatures of the same name. You can only have up to 4 unless otherwise specified. Remote Island. This looks pretty. Comes in play tapped. Adds for a blue. You can cycle it. Reprocess. For 4 mana, sacrifice any number of artifacts, creatures, and lands to draw a card for each one you sacrificed in this way. Everything will find its use in Phyrexia, eventually. Good late game if you need some cards to draw, if you have some extra land to sacrifice, if you have some creatures you don't need on the battlefield anymore. You'll get a heavy advantage. Rescind. Return target permanent to its owner's hand, and it cycles. Retaliation. Chain creature each creature you control gains. When this creature becomes blocked, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. A foul metallic stench clogged Urza's senses. It was then he knew his brother was no more. And here they are fighting on the battlefield. Retromancer. 4 mana, 3/3. If he's the target of a spell or ability, he deals 3 damage to the controller of that spell or ability, and he's Vishnu. If 1 harm us, strike them in return, so saith the Bay. So he's gripping lightning and shooting fire. Pretty good Vishnu. Rewind, a great counter spell. It untaps for 4 lands, so you can counter another spell. Yep, Jameson says very retro. Time flows like a river. In Teleria, we practice the art of building dams. Baron the Master Wizard. Rumbling Crescendo. This is the during your upkeep where you get a verse counter, and when you sacrifice it, destroy X lands, where X is the number of verse counters on the crescendo. And the volcano is about to blow. Rune of Protection artifacts. So the circles of protection got remade in this set, but as runes, and they do the same thing, except you need a white to prevent the damage, and they also have cycling, which helps out if you have them in your deck and you're not against the opposing color that it corresponds to. You can just cycle it. Here's the black one. She has a soup of filth and skulls. Blue one, she has an hourglass. Green one, she has a glyph carved into a tree. I did not know they had one for lands. Red, she has a lantern. And for white, she has a crystal column? Or no, this is a pillar that has painting on it. I forgot about this card. Sanctum Custodian, 3 mana, 1/2 cleric. Tap it to prevent up to 2 damage to a creature or player. Sarah told them to guard Urza as he healed. 5 years they stood. It took Urza 5 years to heal all his wounds when he first visited Phyrexia. Sanctum Guardian. Is he a giant? No, he's a cleric. Who's a guardian? Him or him? And is he holding up is he holding up a pillar that is holding up the whole sanctum? I'm not sure. Anyway, you can sacrifice him to prevent all damage dealt to a creature or player from one source, and he's a 1/4. Protect our mother in her womb. Sandbar Merfolk, 1 mana, 1/1 with cycling. Not really that good. You are not prey until a predator knows of your existence. Sandbar Serpent, he's a 3/4 with cycling. Treacherous and unpredictable occurrence around Teleria earned the nickname Serpent Wakes. Sanguine Guard, 3 mana, 2/2 with first strike and regeneration. Father of machines, your filigree gaze carves us, and the scars dance upon our grateful flesh. I do like the artwork on the card. Scald, whenever a player taps an island for mana, Scald deals 1 damage to that player. Sheev may be surrounded by water, but the mountains go far deeper. Scoria Worm, for 5 mana, 7/7. During your upkeep, flip a coin. If you lose the flip, the worm goes back to its owner's hand. Late at night, ululations echo from deep under Sheev as the worms sing of times older than humanity. I do like that it has like 3 sets of teeth. If only it had trample though. I'm spoiled. 5 mana, 7/7 is good. But the only time I ever used this worm was in my coin flip deck. Scrap, destroy target enchantment, or you can cycle it. Seasoned Marshal, 4 mana, 2/2. When it attacks, you may tap target creature. There are only 2 rules of tactics. Never be without a plan, and never rely on it. Here's an iconic card I forgot about. Sarah Avatar. Costs 7. Its power toughness is equal to your life total. When Sarah Avatar dies, shuffle it back into your library instead. This card was hard to get rid of back in the day, and it was one card that I always wanted, and I eventually ended up getting 4, but I think I sold 2 recently. How much is she worth? Shouldn't be by that much, because I think she got reprinted in oh yeah, this is all the time she got reprinted. So yeah, she's just a measly $4 now. Times have changed. She used to be really powerful. Yep, Jameson said hated fighting her because she was hard to kill. She would always come back, or she would have an ungodly power and toughness because white's the best color to gain life. And if you give her lifelink, then if she's a 20/20 and she hits for 20, then she's going to gain you 20 life. And her life total is always, her power and toughness is always going to change because it's always based on your life total. It'll make her a 40/40, and every time she hits, she'll just double your life total, doubling her power and toughness. And it goes on and on until your opponent's dead. Sarah's Embrace. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2 flying and vigilance. Lifted beyond herself for that battle, Brindri was an angel of light and fury. It's a really good, I think, one of the best embraces. Sarah's Hymn. During your upkeep, put a verse counter on it. You can sacrifice the verse at any time to prevent up to X damage to any number of creatures and or players. Sarah's Liturgy. I've never seen this card. For 4 mana. During your upkeep, put a verse counter on it. You can sacrifice it and destroy up to X artifacts and or enchantments where X is the number of verse counters. Sarah's Sanctum. Tap it for a white for each enchantment you control. A fragile cocoon of dreaming will. Sarah's Zealot. 1/1 for 1 first strike. The humans are useful in their way, but they must be commanded as the builder commands the stone. Be soft with them and they will become soft. Radiant the Archangel. Shimmering Barrier has first strike and it's a 1/3 wall in cycles. Shivan Gorge taps for colors. You can pay 3 and tap it to do 1 damage to all your opponents. Yep, Chrono Trigger music indeed, because it deals with time travel and we went back in time with this set. Both Forge and Pyre. Shivan Hellkite. 7 mana, 5/5 flying. You can pay 2 to deal 1 damage to any target. A dragon's skull can be carved into a mighty shield, provided you can procure a dragon tooth to cut it. I had this dragon, but I don't think I ever used it. Yep, I thought when I thought of Chrono Trigger to use as background music, I immediately thought of urza'ssaga. I mean, it goes hand in hand. Oh, I forgot about Shivan Raptor. I loved this card. 3 mana, 3/1, first strike, Echo, and Haste. He'd be great nowadays because Magic now has a lot of dinosaurs. And there are good cards that empower dinosaurs. Sheev's Embrace. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2 and flying and the fire-breathing ability. You're basically turning someone into a dragon. Where the foes form to best it in battle, so saith the Bay. Show and Tell. Each player may choose an artifact, creature, enchantment, or land card in their hand and put it directly onto the battlefield. At the Academy, Show and Tell often becomes Run and Hide. And this guy has some sort of tentacled eye monster that he's about to bring out. I don't know what this has. A severed head in a bag? Anyway, this is a very powerful card. You can have your biggest creature in your hand and you cast Show and Tell and you put the biggest creature out on the battlefield. But your opponent gets to do the same. So you have to be mindful of that. Shower of Sparks for 1 red. Deal 1 damage to target creature and 1 damage to target player. The Viashino had learned how to operate the rig through trial and error. Mostly error. And we have Urza, dodging himself from the sparks. Sicken. Urza dared to attack Phyrexia. Slowly it retaliated. So here's Urza succumbing to the sickness, and most of it is in his head. So it's taking all while he's healing in Sarah's Sanctum. And Enchanted creature gets -1/-1, and you can cycle it. Forgot to talk about the card. Silent Attendant, 3 mana for a 0/2, tap it to gain a life. I forgot about this card. The answer to life should never be death. It should always be more life, wrapped tight around us like precious silk. Decent life gaining cleric. Scourge Familiar, 5 mana for a 3/2 flying. Choose and discard a card to add 1 black to your mana pool. Play this ability as a mana source. The first Yawgmoth priest to harness their power was rewarded with several unique mutilations. This card is part of a good combo. Later on in Urza's Destiny, there's a card called Yawgmoth's Agenda, where you skip drawing a card, but you can pay 1 life to draw a card. And what you would end up doing with the Scourge, you would, let's say you pay 20, no, you kill yourself. Pay 15 life, draw 15 cards. Discard 15 cards to add 15 black mana to your mana pool, and then you can cast a spell like Drain Life, hit your opponent for 14. you gain 14 life back, pay life until you're down to 1 again to draw that many cards, and then with the Scourge still out, just rinse and repeat until your opponent's dead. Just make sure you don't run out of cards in your library when you did this combo. Skittering Scourge. It's a 3/2 for 2 black flying. When you successfully cast a creature spell, you must sacrifice the Scourge. So you can't play any other creatures if you want to keep the Skittering Scourge alive, but it's a really good aggressive card in my opinion. I've had games where I played the Skittering Scourge on the second turn, and he was my only creature I had for the entire game. And he hits for 3 in the air, which is really good. And I never really had to play any other creatures because I would just use a bunch of kill spells on my opponent's creatures, and they'd get hit for 3 every turn until they were dead. The imp's warbling cries echo through Phyrexia's towers like those of mourning doves in a cathedral. I think this is the best Scourge from all the ones in the set. Sleeper Agent. For 1 black, it's a 3/3. When Sleeper Agent comes into play, target opponent gains control of it. During your upkeep, Sleeper Agent deals 2 damage to you. So you give your opponent a 3/3 creature for 1 black mana, but they take 2 damage during their upkeep because they control the card. That's the Phyrexians infiltrating your side and slowly poisoning you without you knowing it. Slippery Karst is the green cycling card. Land. Smokestack. During your upkeep, put a suit counter on it. During each player's upkeep, that player sacrifices a permanent for each suit counter on Smokestack. Eventually, you're going to end up having... This affects you too, so if you cast Smokestack, you're going to have to sacrifice stuff. But you could always sacrifice the Smokestack to itself and end the effect if it's starting to become a problem for you. Smoldering Crater is the red land with cycling. Excuse me. Sneak Attack for 4 mana enchantment. Pay a red, choose a creature in your hand and put it directly onto the battlefield. The creature can attack as soon as it enters. However, you have to sacrifice it at the end of your turn. Nothing beats a surprise except a rock. The goblins are trying to sneak on this dragon here. This was a really powerful card back in the day. Scalding Tongs was actually in Tempest, Jameson. It had that one fat guy holding the burning tongs, but that was a Tempest card. Oh, I just seen this card is banned in Historic. How much is this card worth? Oh, $9. Somnophore, 4 mana 2/2 flying illusion. When it deals damage to a player, tap a creature that player controls. That creature does not untap as long as Somnophore remains on the battlefield. So Somnophore can get out of hand if it keeps hitting the opponent. It's going to lock down all the creatures that the opponent has. Forgot about this card, Song Stitcher. Pay 2, target attack creature with flying, deals no combat damage this turn. The true names of birds are songs woven into their souls. Good against flying. Soul Sculptor. Pay 2, target creature becomes an enchantment and loses all abilities until a player successfully casts another creature spell. Does the stone mimic life, or did it once live? Good temporary card to control your opponent's creatures. Spined Fluke, 3 mana 5/1 horror. When it enters the battlefield, you have to sacrifice a creature. And it does regenerate for 1 black. It's so hard to decide because Lightning Dragon was my favorite, but I used Spined Fluke more back in the day. And the artwork is really, I like it. It's hard to tell. Hard to make this decision. There's so many good cards in this set. But I'm going to stick with Lightning Dragon. Spine Fluke comes in at a hard second. Its spines are prized as writing quills by the priests of Gix. Spire Owl, 2 mana, 1/1 flying. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of your library and put them back in any order. Sporogenesis. We have a warthog made of spores. During your upkeep, put a fungus counter on target non-token creature. Whenever a creature with a fungus counter on it is put into the graveyard, put a sapling token into play for each fungus counter on that creature. Treat these as 1/1 green creatures. If Sporogenesis leaves play, remove all fungus counters from all creatures. Spreading Algae. You can only play it on a swamp. When the swamp becomes tapped, the land is destroyed, and the algae goes back to its owner's hand. Really crushing card against black. Steam Blast deals 2 damage to each creature and player for 3. The Vishino knew of the cracked pipes, but deliberately left them unmended to bolster the rig's defenses. Yeah, that's really hot steam. If you've ever had like a microwavable meal and you pull the plastic off after it's been cooked, that steam could really burn your skin. And Stern Proctor. For 2 blue, it's a 1/2. When it enters the battlefield, return an artifact or an enchantment to its owner's hand. I preferred the harsh tutors. They made mischief all the more fun. To Furry, the 3rd level student. Here, even in a school of magic, kids are making paper airplanes. Stroke of Genius. For 3 and X, target player draws X cards. After 100 failed experiments, Urza was stunned to find the common silver pass through the portal undamaged. He immediately designed a golem made of the metal. So the whole reason why Urza made Karn was he was doing experiments on time travel, and every time he tried to send a creature through the portal, time would either age it or rip it in half. The creature never survived going through time. So when he ended up finding out that silver made it through without being affected for whatever reason, that's why he made Karn the Silver Golem, so Karn could go back in time. In the story, Urza and everyone at the Academy actually die in a Phyrexian invasion from Gix. So Karn sees this because Urza sends Karn into the future. Karn sees this and is able to return and warn Urza about the invasion that's going to attack the Academy. So Urza is able to better prepare, saving a lot of lives in the process, albeit temporarily, because the Phyrexians end up getting the upper hand through other means later on in the set. Sulfuric Vapors for 4 mana. Whenever a red spell does damage, it instead deals that amount of damage plus 1. It was the dragons who first learned to chase their prey into the vapors before igniting them. These mages are in a duel, and he's about to cast some fire, and his buddy's like, "What are you doing? You're igniting everything." Good artwork. Hey, Lunda, how are you? It's been a while. Sunder, return all lands to their owner's hands. Oh, that would make the game annoying. The flow of time was disrupted. Like a flooding river, it rose from its banks. Teleria was drowned in an instant that stretched toward infinity. Here's a Phyrexian swamp. To see the land is bleak. Their water is like black like oil. These are like telephone poles. And this almost looks like a picket fence. There's a lot of scrap metal lying around. This cold you've caught has bought some Anu with it. Symbiosis. I forgot about this card. 2 target creatures each get +2/+2 until end of turn. Although the elves of Argoth always considered them a nuisance, the pixies made fine allies during war against the machines. Tainted Aether. Whenever a creature comes into play, its controller sacrifices a creature or a land. Gix despised the Sylvan Morass. The gouge that the portal had torn in the forest was the only pleasing sight. And here's Gix coming through the portal. Telepathy for 1 blue. Each of your opponents play with their entire hand revealed. Knowledge is half the battle. That's what, or knowledge is power, whatever cliche quote you want to use. The most disappointing thing about learning telepathy is finding out how boring people really are. That's funny. I could imagine a lot of like people with no imagination. You try to read their mind, and it's just like wind, emptiness, a ghost town in there. Alright, we are almost done. Temporal Aperture for 2 mana. Then you pay 5 and tap it. Shuffle your library and reveal the top card. Till end of turn, you may cast that card without paying its mana cost. The spell has X in its mana cost. X is 0. Really powerful artifact. But it is luck based because your library shuffles and then you reveal the top card. You might get a land and that's not good. You might get your most powerful creature. The Thrawn Quarry. At the end of each turn, if you don't have any creatures, you have to sacrifice the Thrawn Quarry. Tap it to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. This is the mana rig. The reason why, if you don't have any creatures out, it'll become unstable because it constantly needs the help of the Viashino to keep it running. Linda says, codes give you a new word that you learned. It's French. It's pronounced ennui. Oh, ennui. That's basically, it means you feel blah. I might use that, Linda. Thank you for the language lesson. Thrawn Turbine. During your upkeep, you can add 2 colorless mana to your mana pool. This mana cannot be used to play spells, so you can only use it for abilities. When Urza asked the Viashino what it did, they answered, it hums. Thundering Giant. 5 mana 4/3 giant with haste. The giant was felt a few seconds before he was seen. It's okay. Time Spiral. Remove Time Spiral from the game. Each player shuffles their graveyard and hand into their library and draws 7 cards. You get to untap 6 lands. Titania's Boon. Put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. This centaur just punched the hell out of this robot. When the wind rocks the trees, listen for the voices and the creaking of the trunks. If you hear your name, you are one of the goddesses chosen. Yeah, I saw the one trailer for Inside Out, Linda. I never saw the first one. Titania's Chosen. 3 mana 1/1. Whenever a player successfully casts a green spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Titania's Chosen. What do a hero and an arrow have in common? In times of war, are many more made. This was a powerful card back in the day, too. I mean, I think it's still a powerful card. Elves. There are a lot of elves that you can play for cheap, and the more that you play, the bigger the Titania's Chosen will get. Here's Tolarian Academy. I just noticed, I don't know if this is a crab or a window on this tower. I'm trying to get a deeper look. I don't know. It looks like a window. Maybe it's in the shape of a crab. It's kind of boring. Yeah, I never thought I'd watch it. The Academy worked with time until time ran out. That's such a cool flavor text. And it's $113. That's not bad. It's definitely not Guy's Cradle, though. Tolarian Winds. Discard your hand, then draw that many cards. Afterward, Telaria's winds were like the whispers of lost wizards calling for life. Torch Song. During your upkeep, put a verse counter on it. You can pay 3 and sacrifice it to deal X damage to any target where X is the number of verse counters on the Torch Song. This could win the game on its own after like 20 turns or so. Treefolk Seedlings. I forgot about them. Their toughness is equal to the number of forests you control. The year that the brothers landed on Argoth, the trees produced 5 times as many seeds as normal. Treetop Rangers, I forgot about them too. They're a 2/2, they cannot be blocked except by creatures with flying. If you can't catch them, cut the trees down from beneath them. Force them to fight on our terms. It's Mishra. Turnabout. Tap or untap all artifacts, creatures, or lands target player controls. The best cure for a big ego is little failure. I guess this boy messed up the instructor's experiment. Umbilicus for 4 mana. During each player's upkeep, that player must pay 2 life or return a permanent that they control to their owner's hand. It was the explorer's only tether to reality. Unnerve. Oh, Xancha's scared. I assume this is Gix or just some sort of Phyrexian. Each of your opponents discards 2 cards. If fear is the only tool you have left, then you'll never control me. Xancha to Gix. Unworthy Dead. Another great card. 1/1 for 2. Skeleton with regeneration. It's just a reprinted Drudge Skeletons. Ennui is one of the new emotions in Inside Out 2, and it's how your cold's been making you feel. I'm sorry, I do hope you feel better soon, Linda. Great Yawgmoth moves across the seas of shard and bone and rust. We exalt him in life and in death and in between. Oh, wow. There's artwork where they're not skeletons, but more like ghouls. Urza's Armor. It's an artifact that costs 6 mana. However, whenever a source deals damage to you, that damage is reduced by 1. So creatures with only 1 power won't ever hurt you again as long as you have the armor out. The armor isn't legendary, so you can have more than 1 out, further bolstering your defenses. Tanos' blueprints were critical to the creation of my armor. As he once sealed himself in steel, I sealed myself in a walking crypt. Vampiric Embrace. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2 and flying. If it kills any creature, it gets a +1/+1 counter on it. Turns your creature into a vampire. Vebulid? I'm not sure how to pronounce that. It just looks like a giant floating bladder. Kinda ho-hum, you know. Yeah, I've been there before, Linda. I know how that feels. Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh. Nobody cares. Vebulid comes into play with 1+1/+1 counter. During your upkeep, you may put a +1/+1 counter on it. However, whenever it attacks or blocks, you have to destroy it at the end of combat. So it's a one-hitter quitter. Veiled Apparition. If one of your opponents successfully casts a spell, the apparition becomes a 3/3 with flying. During your upkeep, you must pay 2 mana or sacrifice it. Veiled Crocodile, 3 mana. If a player has no cards in hand, the Veiled Crocodile becomes a 4/4 crocodile. Some roads are paved with bad intentions. This is good if you have a good way to open... if you have a way to empty out your hand, a bunch of small casting cost creatures. No, Londa, I think this was a longer stream, and eventually my voice gets tired for talking so much. Veiled Sentry. If one of your opponents casts a spell, it becomes a 2/2. No. Veiled Sentry becomes a creature with power toughness equal to the total casting cost of the spell that was played. Why did green get the worst sleeper enchantments, by the way? They got like the most specific ones. I think white got the best ones, followed by blue. Red doesn't have any. Veiled Serpent. If one of your opponents successfully casts a spell, Veiled Serpent becomes a 4/4 serpent that can attack unless the defending player controls an island. And it has cycling. Veil of Birds. When the opponent successfully casts a spell, Veil of Birds becomes a 1/1 bird with flying. When wind marries sky, even the bride's veil sings her praises. Oh, I forgot about this artwork. Venomous Fangs. When enchanted creature successfully deals damage to a creature, destroy that creature. It essentially gives the creature death touch. All the pain of a shattered forest contained in a single drop. Vernal Bloom. Whenever a forest is tapped for mana, it produces an additional green. Many cultures have legends of a lush, hidden paradise. The elves of Argoth had no need of such stories. Viashino Outrider, and he's riding a dromasaur. 3 mana for a 4/3. He has Echo. Give thy ration to thy mount, if the road be long, so saith the bay. I don't like that he has Echo. 3 mana for a 4/3 is okay. That's all, but Echo makes it suck. Viashino Runner, 4 mana for a 3/2. He cannot be blocked by only one creature. It moved this way and that way. Then before I could stick it, it jumped over my head and was gone. Definitely one of my favorite Viashino. Here's the Viashino Sand Swimmer. He's literally swimming through the sand. 4 mana 3/2. You can pay a red to flip a coin. If you win the flip, he goes back to your hand. If you lose the flip, you have to sacrifice him. Few swim in a place of such thirst. It's not a stream if Lunda doesn't mention Rick and Morty. Viashino Weaponsmith. Whenever a creature blocks it, Viashino Weaponsmith gets +2/+2 into end of turn, making him a 4/4 regularly. Within the Reg settlement, those who have mastered the making of weapons earn the highest honor. Victimize. Choose 2 target creature cards in your graveyard. Sacrifice a creature. If you do, put the 2 chosen creatures into the battlefield tapped. The priest casts Sancha to the ground. It is defective. We must scrap it. It's a good graveyard revival spell, but you have to have a creature to sacrifice to do it. Vile Requiem. It's during your upkeep, it gets a verse counter. You can sacrifice it to destroy X target non-black creatures, where X is the number of verse counters on it. Voice of Grace. 4 mana 2/2 flying, protection from black. Opposite of law is grace, and grace must be preserved. If the strands of grace are unraveled, its design will be lost and the people with it. Voice of Law. Protection from red. Life's balance is as a star. 1 point is law, and law must be upheld. If the knot of orders are loosened, chaos will spill through. Voltaic Key. For 1 mana, pay 1, untap target artifact. It works with the Phyrexian Colossus. The key did not work on a single lock, yet it opened so many doors. Vug Lizard. It's like a cross between a lizard and a mole. It's a 3/4 with Echo, but it has Mountain Walk, so it's better than the 4/3 for 3 with Echo. Wall of Junk. This was a great wall that kept me alive a lot back in the day. It only costs 2 mana, and it's a 0/7. When Wall of Junk blocks, return it to its owner's hand at the end of combat. Urza saw the wall and realized that even if he tore every Phyrexian to pieces, they would still resist him. War Dance. During your upkeep, put a verse counter on it. You can sacrifice it at any time to give target creature +X/+X into end of turn, where X is the number of verse counters on War Dance. If you play this on the first turn, you're going to be hitting a big attack unless your opponent destroys your enchantment somehow, or make sure you don't have a creature. Waylay. Put 3 night tokens onto the battlefield. Treat these as 2/2 white creatures. Remove them from the game at the end of the turn. The fact that it don't have haste means that you can only really use this card to put blockers on the battlefield. And because it's an instant, your opponent won't see it coming regularly. You reek of corruption, spat the knight. Why are you even here? This is Xancha that they found. Last page of cards. Western Paladin. He destroys white creatures. Their weak laws, their flawed systems, they inhibit the grand evolution. In Yawgmoth's name, we shall erase them. Whetstone. For 3, each player puts the top 2 cards of their library into their graveyard. It's not good that it affects you yourself. To hone swords and dull minds. Whirlwind destroys all creatures with flying for 4. Urza tried to rule the air, but Gaia taught him that she controlled all the elements. Wild Dogs. 2/1 for 1 green. During your upkeep, if a player has more life than any other, that player gains control of Wild Dogs. I still think they're good because they're aggressive for green, and they have cycling. So if your life total is already lower and you know it, you just cycle the dogs away and draw a new card. Wildfire. This powerful red spell back in the day. For 6, each player sacrifices 4 lands, and then Wildfire does 4 damage to all creatures. Sheev hatched from a shell of stone around a yolk of flame. Windfall. Each player discards their hand and draws cards equal to the greatest number of cards a player discarded in this way. To fill your mind with knowledge, we must start by emptying it. Winding Worm, 5 mana for a 6/6, and it has Echo. Entire trees were stripped of their bark and branches by the worm's writhing path. I like the artwork on it. Dieter Lizzie does real good work. Wirecat, 4 mana for a 4/3. It cannot attack or block if there is an enchantment in play. Its purr is the sound of iron filings sliding down satin. Witch Engine, 6 mana for a 4/4 with Swamp Walk. You can tap it to add 4 black mana to your mana pool. Target opponent will gain control of it. And because it has Swamp Walk, they're most likely just going to keep attacking you with it. So the card's not good at all. It costs 6 mana, and by the time you're able to get 6 mana, unless you use Dark Ritual, why are you going to need 4 additional mana at the cost of giving a potentially unblockable creature to your opponent? Artwork is pretty cool. I do like the Witch Engines, but that's about it. Wizard Mentor, 2 mana or 3 mana 2/2. Tap him to return him and another creature you control to its owner's hand. Although some of the students quickly grasped the concept, the others could summon only blackboards. Worn Power Stone, and on its battlefield, tap for 3, but you can tap it for 2 colorless mana, which is really good. Warship, this is one of White's most powerful cards. Damage that would reduce your life total to less than 1 reduces it to 1 instead, as long as you control a creature. Believe in the ideal, not the idol, from Sarah. Jason remembers I had Urza's Armor off, and one time I had 4 out, and it was frustrating. I remember I used it a lot. I had this deck that had a card called Barbed Wire, which dealt 1 damage to each player during my upkeep. But with Urza's Armor out, it means I'm immune to Barbed Wire. And the opponent would just keep taking damage from it. Yawgmoth's Edict. This poor dove fell into this muck and it can't fly out. When one of your opponents successfully casts a white spell, that player loses a life and you gain a life. Phyrexia's Purity permits no other. Xantcha the Phyrexian Outcast. Yawgmoth's Will. For 3 mana, until end of turn, you may play cards in your graveyard as though they were in your hand. Cards put into your graveyard this turn are removed from the game instead. Zephid, 6 mana for a 3/4 flying. It looks like a dragonfly. Dragon. Cannot be the target of spells or abilities. Once you've seen one, you'll understand why spells won't go near them. Outdated card. Zephid's Embrace, however, is a little better. It gives the enchant creature +2/+2 flying, and they cannot be targeted spells or abilities. Spells will shun you as everyone else will. No one likes that you got dragonfly wings. And that is the last card from urza'ssaga. So I gotta go to the lightning dragon. He is a bit of ways to do our closing statement. Down here. Looming Shade. Looming Shade is good in there too. Definitely put in the top 10 of cards we said. There we go. Lightning Dragon takes the cake. We will be continuing Urza's path as he begins. Now that he has acquired the mana rig in Sheev, he can start building artifacts, and here he will begin to make his race of soldiers called the Metatron. And the story will play out more in the next set, Urza's Legacy. And this is where me and my brothers and my friends truly our Magic game started taking off. And every set going forward would be new to us afterwards. So what were your favorite cards from Urza's Saga? Did you play back in the day from one of the most powerful sets in the game? And what combos would you like to share from the cards that you've seen today? Till next time, I will see you for Urza's Legacy. And we will keep the saga going. Take care, everybody, and have a good night.